He walked into his own cafe dressed like a janitor, and what he heard made his coffee go cold before the first sip. Jordan Miles stood still in front of the glass door of Rise and Grind Café, the place that used to be his biggest dream. Today, he was not wearing his familiar silver watch, nor his suit with the founder logo on it. Instead, he wore an old uniform, holding a mop in his hand, stepping inside like an hourly janitor. No one recognized him, no one greeted him. The smell of roasted coffee still lingered, just like the early days, but in that same air, there was something cold, something empty. Jordan was a black man who once slept on park benches, rejected everywhere he went because of his past. He built this cafe on one belief, that a single cup of coffee could be the beginning of a brand new life. Rise and Grind had once been the place where he hired those who had fallen, giving them a second chance to start over. But lately, he had heard rumors that the cafe was no longer a home for kindness. Poor customers were being looked down upon. The staff smiled mechanically, speaking like programmed machines. And that heart that used to define the brand seemed to have died. Today, Jordan came back, not as the owner, but as a stranger who wanted to see if his brainchild still had a soul. Inside, the espresso machine hummed softly, and just a few minutes later, Jordan would hear something that made the coffee in his hand go cold before he even took the first sip. Before Rise and Grind Cafe ever existed, Jordan Miles had nothing but his calloused hands and a record full of stains. He used to sit for hours on the street, staring through the glass of fancy coffee shops, just dreaming of stepping inside, not as a beggar, but as a regular person. But every time he applied for a job, he heard the same line: "I'm sorry, we don't hire people with a criminal record." Doors kept closing, again and again. Then one rainy night, Jordan found an old coffee machine left by the door of a store. He wiped it clean, placed it on a wooden table he had picked up from a junkyard, and said to himself, "If no one gives me a chance, I'll make my own." From two broken tables and a dream full of faith, Rise and Grind Cafe was born. The slogan he wrote by hand hung right by the door: "Where second chances start with a cup." The cafe quickly became something special in the neighborhood. It was a place where those who had lost their way could begin again with a job. A cup of coffee, a simple greeting. Customers came not just to drink, but to feel the faith in humanity, something Jordan guarded with all his heart. But success brought change. When Rise and Grind opened new branches, Jordan had to hand over management to someone else, Cynthia Hale, a white woman who was sharp, quick, and skilled at turning everything into profit. Under Cynthia's leadership, revenue grew, the customers were wealthier, the place looked more polished. But slowly, Jordan noticed the familiar faces. Those who once believed in second chances were disappearing. In their place were Jan, smooth-talking employees, looking at customers with selective eyes. Then one evening, Marcus, the first worker Jordan had ever helped, texted him, "Jordan, the cafe isn't the same anymore. They're kicking out homeless people. They speak the language of money now, not compassion." Jordan froze. He knew that hearing about it wasn't enough. He had to see it with his own eyes to understand how far things had changed. So he decided to return, not as the founder, but as an ordinary janitor, to see whether Rise and Grind still truly rose, or if it had already sunk in its own spotlight. That morning, Rise and Grind Cafe was packed. Sunlight streamed through the large window, reflecting off the golden logo, the very one Jordan had once drawn by hand. He put on his rubber gloves, broom in hand, and quietly swept between the rows of chairs. No one turned around. No one recognized the man who had built it all. The smell of baked pastries and coffee filled the room, yet to him, that once comforting scent suddenly tasted bitter. Behind the counter stood Troy, a white man in his mid-20s. Hair slicked back, headphones hanging around his neck. He was making coffee, but his eyes never left his phone. Next to him was Lila, a young cashier with sharp eyes that measured customers more than they welcomed them. The bell above the door jingled. A black man walked in, his beard unkempt, his jacket worn thin. He lowered his head and spoke timidly. Could I get the smallest, cheapest cup you have?" Lila glanced him up and down, then leaned toward Troy and whispered, loud enough for Jordan to hear, "We really need to stop letting these people in. They scare customers." Jordan's hand froze mid-wipe. Those words cut through him like a blade because years ago, he had heard that exact same sentence about himself. Moments later, an older woman approached the counter, speaking softly. "Excuse me, this pastry is a little dry. May I exchange it for another one?" Troy didn't even look up. His reply was flat. "This isn't a charity, ma'am. We sell what we bake." The room grew so heavy that the hiss of the espresso machine sounded deafening. Jordan bent down, quietly wiping a spill from the floor. Every stroke of the mop pressed another weight of disappointment onto his heart. He could almost hear his mother's voice echoing in his head. "Kindness is like coffee, baby. If you leave it sitting too long, it turns bitter." His eyes blurred. He knew that if he stopped here, he still would not have seen the full truth. As he was about to leave, voices rose from the kitchen, a heated argument. A familiar voice, Marcus. "Cynthia, you can't talk to customers like that. The man just asked for a cup of coffee." Then came a cold, sharp female voice, Cynthia's. "Marcus, this is a cafe, not a shelter. If you want to play hero, do it somewhere else." Jordan stood frozen, his hand tightening around the mop handle. In that instant, he knew the thing he feared most had come true. Rise and Grind had lost its soul. Jordan stood by the kitchen door, his breath caught in his throat. Cynthia's voice cut through the air, crisp and colder than the air conditioner humming above them. "You're not here to save the world, Marcus. We're here to make it look good. Keep your charity outside my cafe." For a moment, time seemed to stop. Those words, "make it look good," squeezed his heart, because Rise and Grind was never meant to look good. It was meant to do good. Marcus replied softly, his tone calm but trembling. "This place used to be the charity." No one spoke after that. Only the faint ticking sound of the oven echoed, marking the rhythm of something quietly breaking apart. Jordan turned away, not wanting anyone to see his eyes, heavy with pain and shame. That night, he sat inside his old car parked by the curb, the very same spot where he had once slept during his first nights chasing this dream. Raindrops tapped gently against the windshield. He opened a worn leather notebook and wrote, his hand shaking, "Cafe lost its soul. Cynthia runs it like a brand, not a belief. Marcus still remembers. I owe him." Streetlights glowed over the smudged ink. Jordan slowly closed the notebook. Outside, the Rise and Grind sign still shone faintly, but to him, its light no longer came from within. He took a deep breath, opened his phone, and typed a short message addressed to all staff. "Staff meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m., mandatory, no excuses." The next morning, everyone gathered in the cafe. The air was tense. No one knew what was about to happen. Then, the door opened. Jordan walked in. No more janitor's uniform. He wore a white shirt and a brown vest, the image of the founder of Rise and Grind that everyone had once admired. The cafe fell silent. Troy quickly pulled off his headphones. Lila lowered her head, flustered. Marcus straightened up, eyes shining with a mix of joy and worry. Cynthia forced a polite smile. "Oh, Mr. Miles, I didn't expect." Jordan raised his hand gently, but firmly. "That's the problem. No one expected me, not even my own team." The room went dead quiet. He looked around, his voice calm but cutting deep like a blade. "I built this place not so any of us could make a living, but so those who had lost everything could have a chance to live with dignity." He spoke, every word like a memory. About the days he mopped the floors just like them. About the nights when all he had was a cup of coffee and faith that kindness still had a place in this world. Then he looked straight at them, not angry, just filled with quiet disappointment. "Yesterday, I heard you mock a homeless man in the cafe that once fed me when I had nothing. If I could survive this world with nothing but a cup of coffee and faith, then the least we can serve people here is respect." The whole cafe fell still. Only the sign outside swayed gently in the wind. Jordan stayed silent for a few seconds, then folded his arms and walked toward the small meeting table in the back of the cafe. "Take a seat," he said calmly, like a host inviting guests into his kitchen, a place where the truth was meant to be spoken. The group gathered around. Cynthia stood by the edge, Marcus rested his hands on the chair, and Troy and Lila sat across from each other, visibly uneasy. Jordan opened his bag and placed 2 folders on the table. "These are the 2 choices," he said. "Option 1, you leave, with 2 weeks' pay and a good reference letter. Option 2, you stay, but things will not be the same. We start again, from the heart." Cynthia frowned. "You talk like this is a church. I run a business. Jordan, image matters." Jordan replied softly, "Image brings people in, heart makes them come back." The air tightened. Lila couldn't hold back her tears. I am sorry. I forgot why I applied here in the first place. I used to be the one sitting out there." Troy swallowed hard. "I thought the company just needed money. I didn't realize I was hurting people." Marcus looked at them, his voice warm and steady. "This place gives people a chance, not so they can thank us, but so we remember that we were given one too." Cynthia straightened her back, her face cold. "If my value here is just charity work, then I'm done. I did everything right by the numbers." Jordan nodded slowly. "If you think right means treating people for profit, then you never understood the mission." Cynthia gathered her purse. The meeting room door closed softly behind her. No shouting, no drama, only the quiet sound of footsteps leaving. The air seemed to clear. Lila let out a shaky sob and wiped her tears. "I want to stay. I want to relearn this." Troy placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "I'll stay too. I want to deserve this place." Jordan looked at them, not angry, but firm. "If you stay, start with the little things. How you greet customers, how you place a cup on the counter, how you see people as human beings, not as problems. 2 weeks from now, if I do not see change, I will hire someone else. I do not want that to happen, but this cafe has to live on kindness, not excuses." They nodded. Marcus smiled faintly, his eyes brighter than usual. "Give me a knife in the oven. I'll bake." Jordan grabbed the calendar and wrote down, "Staff training, culture restoration, starting now." That afternoon, Rise and Grind opened its doors looking the same, but feeling entirely different. Jordan did not sit in the office. He stood behind the counter, brewing coffee, his movements grounded and familiar. Just like in the early days, Marcus worked the oven, filling the air with butter and vanilla. Troy practiced greeting customers by name. Lila, still nervous, greeted every person with an honest smile whenever their eyes met. A young woman entered, her resume creased, marked by her past. She held it tight as if it carried her whole life. Jordan looked at her and smiled. "Take a seat, we'll give you a trial shift." She trembled, as if someone had just handed her a ticket into another world. No grand speeches were made that day. Change was shown through small acts. A free pastry quietly given to the homeless man. Marcus placing a clean towel on a stranger's shoulders. Jordan handing a fresh plate of cookies to an elderly woman with a kind gaze. Old customers began returning, not loudly, but by staying longer, ordering another cup, and meeting the staff's eyes as if to see whether the cafe's heart had truly returned. When the bell above the door rang again and again, Jordan wiped his hands on a kitchen towel and listened to the familiar footsteps of a community finding its way home. He didn't make any grand announcement. He simply exhaled, softly, like a man who knew he had done what was right. The whole cafe seemed to breathe again. And as Marcus murmured by the oven, placing down a freshly baked pastry, "On the house, because somebody once believed I deserved it too." A week later, Rise and Grind Café no longer gleamed like the glossy posters, but the atmosphere was entirely different. Every morning, laughter echoed from the kitchen, the aroma of roasted coffee blended with the warmth of fresh pastries. Regular customers started coming back, not because of discounts, but because they felt that something had truly returned, kindness. The homeless man from before came again, same worn-out shoes, same cautious eyes. Before he could say a word, Marcus stepped forward and smiled. "Take a seat, sir," This one's on us because someone once believed I was worthy of being invited. 2. The man blinked in surprise, then nodded slowly between the wooden tables. That small gesture felt like a candle relit in the middle of the room. Jordan stood near the door, quietly observing. Outside, the Rise and Grind sign flickered. One of the bulbs was dying. Marcus was about to fix it, but Jordan shook his head. Leave it. Imperfection reminds us there's always work to do. As evening fell and the cafe emptied out, Jordan opened his old notebook to the last page and wrote slowly. Culture needs watering. Kindness needs maintenance. He looked up, taking in the space around him, a room that had once held pain and loss. And now, slowly, was filling again with hope. His voice dropped low, not aimed at anyone in particular, more like a message to himself. And to everyone who had ever built something with love. If you built something with heart, go back and check if it's still beating. And if it's not, don't blame the world. Roll up your sleeves, fix it. The final image, Jordan turning off the lights, leaving only the glow that spilled through the window, the Rise and Grind logo reflected on the rain-soaked street. Imperfect, but alive. Then came the closing voiceover, soft, deep, and full of weight. Kindness isn't a one-time act. It's a maintenance job, one cup, one person, one choice at a time. Share this story if you believe kindness can be rebuilt, one cup of coffee. One action, one person at a time.